Hello, my name is Madison Holland Cox, and today I will be presenting on social perception from week 2. In a world where almost everyone has their life on the internet for all to see, low self esteem and comparing ourselves to others is so highly recognized. Individuals scroll through social media for hours a day, secretly and sometimes unwillingly comparing their self worth and self image to those they see on the screen. It is almost as if we find ourselves under an imaginary spotlight in the presence of others, either physically or through what we post online. All over the world, people have a strong need for high self-esteem. They want to see themselves in a positive light. In the process of trying to portray ourselves to the outside world as over-flattering what our life really is, we may find ourselves in the process of comparing ourselves to others. The social comparison theory centers on the belief that there is a drive within all of us to gain accurate self-evaluations. Individuals evaluate their own opinions and abilities by comparing themselves to others in order to reduce uncertainty in how they define themselves. Self-esteem and self-comparison go hand in hand. How does social media have such a huge influence on these two? We will dive into discussing that further on. But social media is not only an outlet that has people finding themselves stuck in a hole of questioning who they are and comparing themselves to others. It is also an open door to explore social perception, which is a term used for the process in which people come to understand one another. We also use social perception every day, with or without social media. Understanding other people is essential to life. We watch the way that they behave, the way they interact with others, or how they handle themselves in situations. We also gain information about ourselves by watching how we behave, comparing ourselves to others, and thinking about ourselves. We have a need to understand why people communicate the way they do. We have a desire to understand social events around us. This is known as the attribution theory. Every day, we are trying to interpret social cues, trying to understand social events, and making judgments on social rules and relationships. Self-esteem, self-comparison, social media influence, and the attribution theory. Social perception brings all of these ideas together and is the key component to understanding these ideas. We often wonder why people do the things that they do. We try to make sense of our world. This is social perception. It is how we make impressions about other individuals. In Chapter 4 of Kassin's social psychology book, he defines social perception as a general term for the process by which people come to understand one another. People learn about others by picking up information about an individual's personality, verbal and nonverbal communication, facial expressions, and tone of voice. An example of social perception would be how one reacts when they disagree with an argument. If they noticeably become angry by their body movements, such as rolling their eyes, or by the way they speak, such as changing their tone of voice to anger or frustration, we can make the assumption that they disagree with what was said. Social perception is shaped by an individual's current motivations and emotions. One important factor that plays into social perception is attribution, which is expressing an individual's personality as a source or cause of their behavior during an event or a situation. The attribution theory is a group of theories that describe how people explain the causes of their behaviors. Mail further on explains that the attribution theory is how individuals interpret events and how this relates to their thinking and behavior. We attempt to determine if an individual's behavior is internally or externally caused, meaning, was their behavior caused by something in their control and power, or something situational that was out of their control and power? An example of this would be that a friend of yours seems very distant from the friend group lately. You may assume that it is something you did personally. Or maybe the friend is moving on to another group of friends. But a couple days later, your friend tells you that she has had a lot on her mind because she found out her grandpa was dying and she was processing all of the news. Or take this photo for example. This teacher is showing two different types of attribution: dispositional and situational. It illustrates him looking at the situation of the student handing her homework in late, first as it just being lazy. This is dispositional attribution. But then it shows him looking at it from a situational standpoint, that maybe this wasn't her fault and that there is something going on at home. These are examples of attribution. Assumptions were made about a behavior of another person without knowing the full story. The attribution theory can be used in many cases in life, either face-to-face, over the phone, through email and text, or even social media. We may compare ourselves to someone else's life based on what we see from the outside. We make assumptions that they have a well put together life and compare it to ours just because of what others are willing to show the rest of the world. Or maybe we compare ourselves to others that we assume have it worse than us. Both cases are using the theory of attribution. It is human nature to compare ourselves to those around us. We may find ourselves comparing our athletic abilities to others on the team. We may notice that we try our best to have the body image of the men and women that we see on TV. We try to excel at work in order to overshadow our coworkers. We may not mean to compare ourselves to others, but we unintentionally do it. This falls in line with impersonal casualty, which applies to unintentional human behaviors such as feeling sad or angry. Social comparison theory is the concept that people assess their own abilities and opinions by comparing themselves to others around them. Fessinger, who is the founder of the social comparison theory, suggests that people have a basic need to maintain a stable and accurate self-view. Because of this, people tend to seek information feedback about their characteristics and capabilities, either through social media or through other means of communication with others. Every individual wants to know their worth in this world. Self-esteem is an individual's evaluation of their own worth. It is the building block in understanding our own desires, values, and characteristics. In everyone, but especially adolescents, self-esteem is strongly related to their overall well-being. When self-esteem is talked about, self-concept is a subject that correlates with it as well. Self-concept is the overall set of beliefs that people have about themselves. All over the world, people are searching for a strong need to have high self-esteem, and they crave to see themselves in a positive light. Sadly, self-esteem has been subjected to comparing oneself to others. When people enter into a state of self-awareness, they become their own worst critics and experience a temporary drop in self-esteem. Social media plays a big factor in this. Adolescents especially find themselves comparing their social media profiles to others that they follow. As stated earlier, social media has become a huge influence in the way that individuals view themselves and others. Casson explains that research has shown that the more time people spend on Facebook, the worse they feel about themselves. This is not surprising, considering that the study done by Schouten and Vackenberg, adolescent self-esteem was greatly impacted by the tone of the feedback that they received on their profile. Positive feedback enhanced their self-esteem, while negative feedback decreased their self-esteem. This also falls in line with the study done to see the influence of word-of-mouth communication. This research suggested that negative word-of-mouth communication has a power to influence the attitudes and the behaviors of others. What these studies prove is that the influence that others have on individuals' self-esteem is greatly impacted by many forms of communication, whether that be through social media or through word of mouth. Self-esteem and the concepts of self is so important to each individual. They allow us as humans to understand our own emotions, self-worth, and beliefs and values that set us apart from everyone else. We use social perception to help us understand those around us. We try to make sense of the world. Attributions are a key player in social perception. The attribution theory helps us see if the cause of a behavior in an individual is internal or external. Though the social media outlet has taken advantage of individuals' self-esteem by marketing self-comparison all over the place, the concept of self-esteem goes much deeper than that. Social media should not be the key holder to self-concepts and self-esteem. It is only hopeful that one day individuals will not have the ability to so easily compare themselves to others based on what they see on social media. It is also hopeful that people realize the importance of self-esteem enough to understand that they are ultimately in control of their own self-perception. It is a strong source of what makes us all unique, and it must be taken care of carefully. Before we end this presentation, I would like to ask you 2 questions. 1. Can you give an example of someone in the Bible who compared themselves to others and, because of this self-comparison, had decreased self-esteem? And 2. In your own opinion, how does self-comparison affect one's view of themselves? Thank you so much for watching my presentation. I hope that it helped you understand a little bit more about social perception. Have a great day. Here's a list of all the references that I used in today's presentation.